And we're live.
Hi. Hi, Ramona. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. And you?
Well, I'm good. Welcome to our show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And Tim, hello. And to our audience, hello to you as well.
Yes. So we thought for a while that we had massive issues with Ramona's sound, so we thought we were going to have to do a first ever sign language show. But thankfully, she got it working just a minute before we were supposed to go live. So, to the uninformed out there, could you say a little bit about who is Ramona Samuel and what do you do?
All right, that's me.
Yes.
Right. So yes.
Yeah, it's you I'm talking about.
Who is Ramona? Indeed, I'm still working on that, Tim. I don't quite know it anyway. So I'm Ramona, and I'm a Methodist minister, and I'm based in Chelmsford in Essex, in the United Kingdom. I'm originally from the Caribbean. I was born in the island of Dominica. And when I was 14, my family moved to Antigua, another Caribbean island. And I've worked out that I've lived in the UK for the longest part of my life. So first 14 years in Dominica, and then I left Antigua when I was 28 for the UK. And I've been here 26 years this September. Yes. So, and I'm 53. I'm going to be 54 in June.
Yay! Congratulations. We celebrate. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I was saying you stayed here for the weather, clearly. So
absolutely, yes.
I was going to say we celebrate age here. So.
Oh yeah, I'm not afraid of telling my age. Yes.
I love it. So so tell us this. You came from the islands over to the UK. What brought you to the UK?
Love. Apparently. So I got married in Antigua when I was 28, and my husband at the time was studying in the UK in Manchester. So we came over here with the intention of finishing up some studies and then going back to Antigua. And 26 days later, I'm still here. So, yes.
And in the process, you became a minister. And this is something I'm very curious about because in the US, it's not as rare anymore, but women in ministry are, on the uprise. So tell us about your process of becoming a woman as a ministry woman.
Right. Well, the story kind of goes really, really far back. I'll try to do really quickly in a minute or less. I grew up in a Baptist church, and when I was around 16 years old, really felt a call to ministry, went to speak to my youth leader, who was the pastor's wife at the time. And she very kindly told me that was never going to happen because I was a woman and I could possibly get married to a man who's in ministry and I could help him. But I myself could not be a woman in ministry. That's the background to that. And then some years later, when I was in my early 20s, I actually went to Jamaica to study theology. So I went to Jamaica for 2 years and did theology to train for ministry for 2 years. So that was 30 something years ago, about 30 or so years ago. And so the call kind of never left. And so when I came to the UK, obviously it was there like, hello. And at the time then I found myself working for a Methodist church and then became part of the Methodist church. So then candidated is the term Methodists use, candidated for Methodist ministry. It started when the kids were little, but then because they were little, I put a stop on it and did it a few years down the line. So I got ordained in 2016, I think. 2016, yes. So the long journey that started 30 something years ago to now.
I have more questions, Tim, but I'm going to let you.
Yeah. Is this
a whole nother show?
Yeah. I mean, is it something back in Antigua? Are there female ministers and things back in the Caribbean, or is it this something that you could only really do in the UK?
No. This was just the church I was going to, the Baptist church I grew up in, was just not in favor of women.
Okay,
Yeah. So it wasn't an Antigua thing at all. So other denominations had women. So I eventually left that Baptist church and went to another church, and they were okay with women in ministry, and so on. And church, the Anglican church in Antigua, the Methodist church in Antigua have women as ministers. So apart from the Catholics and the Baptists, pretty much everybody else has, and
I found it to be quite interesting as I get to know more and more vicars and deacons and ministers throughout the UK. It seems that it's the norm. Is that the case? Is it?
You obviously are hanging around lots of Anglicans and Methodists. So,
so it's not the norm.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word norm. I think it's certainly more prevalent. I mean, the Methodist Church actually started ordaining women before the Church of England. Yay for Methodists.
Yeah.
So way back, when the Church of England wasn't doing that, the Methodist Church started ordaining women in the 70s. So they kind of started that. But other sort of non-denominational churches, like kind of Pentecostal or evangelical churches, they do have women in ministry, although I think for a lot, and the Wesleyan Church, so the Wesleyan Church is a breakaway that started in the US from the Methodist Church. So the Wesleyan Church in the UK do have women as ministers. So my very good friend, one of my best friends, she's actually the district superintendent, which is like a big deal, of the Wesleyan Church here in the UK. So yeah, it depends on the denomination. And I think because the UK is smaller than the US as well, so there's not that breadth of, beliefs and so on. But yeah, there are some Anglicans and probably even Methodists who don't believe in women in ministry. So even within those denominations that ordain women, there are people who don't believe that should be the case.
I see. Okay. Hi, Ramona, says Maria.
Hi, Maria. So Maria is a fellow deacon. We got ordained together.
Yay. Welcome. Please be part of the conversation. I'm learning.
So how can I ask this? I'm going to ask this question. Do you think what are the advantages to being female in terms of being a minister? Do you think there is something that you have that maybe a male minister doesn't have?
Apart from the fact that women are awesome.
Well, I mean, I never like to use generalizations about anybody from like sex or race or the rest of it. But yeah, I mean,
go on. Sorry, finish your sentence.
Well, no, it was one of those. I started a sentence and I couldn't think of the end of it. So, but I'm giving you a few more seconds to think of an answer. I mean, clearly, because you were a mother when you were ordained. Do you think? I mean, there's the motherhood element and then there's the female element. Do you think those help in terms of being a minister?
I mean, I think that whatever task or job or role we do, whether it's in religious ministry or otherwise, we bring parts of ourselves to those roles.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure I would say that there are particular feminine aspects.
Yeah.
Because everybody's different. And so I think I bring parts of Ramona, who happens to be a woman, a female person, but I wouldn't say that there is something about being female, particularly, that I bring to the role. And maybe that's a good question. That's something I need to think about. I mean, there is the thing about female intuition, which I believe in, even though having said, I don't think there's anything particular. And so in that sense, I think there's a certain, the way that women have been conditioned by society over the years. So we approach life in a particular way. And part of that is due to societal conditioning. And so therefore we would approach things differently. So, for example, I think if a woman was president of Russia, I'm not sure we would be having this crazy war at the moment, for example.
No.
And so I think there's a particular way that men present themselves. And part of that, I think, has to do with the way society has conditioned and told us this is the way you're meant to be as a man, this is the way you're meant to be as a woman. And so we bring parts of that. But I very much try not to present myself as a woman. I think I'm Ramona and I happen to be a woman.
Yeah.
And that's more important to me. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. I know one of the things I saw Tim write out when he knew we were going to interview you is the importance of religion in the world today. So I'm curious. I'm going to ask this, maybe not quite how Tim would, but you can change that, Tim, however you want. Ramona, for you, what is the importance of religion in our current day and in our current time?
I think my answer would be, and I saw that a couple hours earlier. I would say I would take out the word religion out of that, because I think religion has so many negative connotations, and there have been so many atrocities that have been committed in the name of religion across the board, whatever religion you can think of, that I wouldn't necessarily use that. But I would say that spirituality has a particular relevance in our world today, because I do believe that we are body, mind, spirit. And so that is quite useful. And for me, as somebody who names themselves as a Christian, I do believe that Christianity has a lot to offer. Never mind all the other horrible things we do, because we're human beings. I do believe that there's a lot that Christianity has to offer. And the day I stop believing that, I can no longer be a minister, because then that would just be hypocritical to be not believing that there's any relevance to my Christianity and still engaging in that. So in terms of relevance, I think it's really about how we show up in the world. And I like to say to people that when we read scripture, if we read it in terms of thinking about relationships, so what is the Bible telling us about how God wants to relate to us, and how God wants us to relate to him or her, and how does God want us to relate to each other? I really believe that the Bible is about relationship, and the point of Jesus coming is that whole idea of incarnation was to being as one of us, and God coming to be with us so that we can be closer to God. So I think for me, that's the essence of Christianity, that relationship. And then how does that relationship affect how I show up in the world, how I relate to the people around me, and the values that I hold, and so on.
So I have a backup question to that. How do you show up in the world, Ramona? Who is Ramona, and how do you show up for us?
Nobody else knew who she was.
That's a very deep, you see, that's a deep question. We don't have enough time, Crystal.
I'm doing it a little bit differently. What?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if you'd asked me that question 10 years ago, I'm not sure. I think my answer would be very different. And I would say that over the last few years in particular, I've been on a different kind of journey. And I believe in stages of life. So when I grew up, when I was growing up, I was very much, my self-esteem was rock bottom. And I showed up as the bubbly, always smiling Ramona. But deep inside, there was always pain and hurt. And then as I got into my 20s, early 20s, I began to unpack all of that stuff. And then I go into my 30s or 40s. So by the time I'm hitting my 50s now, it's like, I ain't got time for that anymore. So now I'm on this journey of realizing who is the real Ramona. And so for me, I try to show up in a way that's authentic to me, without causing harm to other people. So by that, I mean, some people say, well, this is the way I am, take me or leave me. And normally when people say that, they're being nasty or doing something negative. So that's not what I mean when I talk about me showing up as me. It means a friend asked me that question about 2 years ago, and I did some deep work. And I think a year later, it occurred to me what the essence of me was. And the essence of me is generosity. So if I were not able to be generous in life, I don't think I could be authentically me. And so that was really mind blowing and opening up. Okay, so then if that's generosity, then how does that show up in the way I deal with my family, friends? And generosity is not just about finances, it's about generosity of spirit, generosity of time and space, and who I am as a person. So I would say for me, I am continuing to learn more about me and unpacking who Ramona is, and not who Ramona is based on what my family have said or friends have said, or even what God says. And I say that hesitantly, but there we can hide often behind those things. So we can say, well, the Bible says I'm a child of God, I'm blessed, highly favored, but we're not really living like that. We have hidden things in us that we haven't dealt with. So if you are blessed and highly favored, why aren't you dealing with your trauma? Why aren't you dealing with your pain? Why be nasty to somebody else? So we hide behind phrases. And I'm very much on this journey of trying to not hide behind those things, and trying to be true to what I'm feeling in the moment, but making sure that in the process of that, I'm not causing harm to people around me. I hope that answers your questions, Christelle.
It does. And I'm wondering how that works in your role as a minister, because you show up, for the church, or maybe you might have several churches or an entire district. I'm not quite sure how it works, but how do you show up in that way, but also maintain boundaries for Ramona?
Yeah. Again, that's another thing I've been learning, because I realized that one of the things I do is that I process out loud. So the way I process information is by talking. And I would show up in spaces and I would, say things without, I haven't been thinking about it. And I would wonder, why are people reacting so weird? I didn't mean anything. And I realized that what I was doing was processing. So I had to then take a step back from that and realize you can't just vomit all over people, and so for me, it's about, I try to be as transparent as possible in my preaching without vomiting. And I probably should find a better word over people, and what I mean is, for example, I talk about my struggles with mental illness, but I'm not sort of giving people a blow by blow description of everything. It's in the context of, okay, this is where I am, and this is what is God saying about that, and what is God saying to you about that if you are in that situation. So that's kind of how I try to do it. And I try to listen to people, because I think that's really important. I try to listen to what people are saying, and really see them, and get a sense, and use that intuition I talked about earlier to get a sense as to how I can be in that space, and also have that understanding of protecting my personal space. And one of the things I think ministers struggle in terms of boundaries is about that he's saying yes to things. Somebody asks you to do something, you just say yes. And I'm learning that I don't have to say yes to everything, and it's okay not to say yes to everything. It's okay to go and think about it and say, let me have a think and get back to you, and so on. So those are some of the ways I think I try to show up authentically without overstepping, as it were, and recognizing when I mess up, when I was like, oh, Ramona, that was a bit off the back, and being able to have that kind of self-reflection, and actually say, I will say, I said this, I shouldn't have done that, which I think is really important.
Yeah. So clearly you deal with, I don't know what term you use, your congregation, I suppose, but it may not be congregation, it's not what you use. But what are the biggest issues that you're having to help people with at the moment, just from a pastoral role? What would you say people are coming to you and saying, like, is it that they feel the moral standards of the world are going down, or is it day-to-day issues with affordability and that kind of stuff? I mean, what are the biggest problems that you see in the world that your congregation, I suppose, is suffering from at the moment?
I think, well, the first thing to say is that the congregations I work with are largely elderly folks. So
Oh,
average
okay.
age, perhaps 60s in average age, retirement age mostly.
Yeah.
And so there are different conversations. So most of the conversations are around physical health,
Yeah.
And at the moment, one of the pressing things is the after effects of COVID. So quite a
Yeah.
few of our congregation members just haven't returned. They haven't been to church for 2 years. Either that because some of them are still timid about it, they're afraid. Some of them are just don't feel ready, and then some of them have gotten older and iller,
Mm.
so they just can't. A few have ended up in nursing homes. So their concerns are really just how do they just
How
survive,
surviving, yeah.
and that feeling of loss, of not being able to do the things that they always did.
Mm.
So I used to really help out. I used to do this in the church. I used to do that, and I can't do it anymore. And that's what they're grieving: the things that they can no longer do. And also the relationship that we have as Methodist ministers to our members is a very different one to, say, if I were a Baptist pastor. Perhaps I'm making an assumption there, or the sort of evangelical churches,
Yeah.
in that the Methodism works in circuit ministry. So I'm part of a circuit. There are 3 ministers in the circuit, and we looking the 2 of us who are working across 5 churches. So there isn't that one
Connection.
focus, as it were, where I am there constantly. So at the moment, my focus is across 2 churches, 2 congregations. That's only happened recently. So it's really difficult to you don't get to know people in the same way as you would if you had one congregation. I mean, that's one of the things I find difficult.
Yeah.
But you still get to know people, and their stories is really about, how are we going to survive as a church? And for them, they've been coming to church all their lives, so most of them, and the idea that we could not be around in 5 years is one of the things that we're dealing with at the moment, because finances have taken a hit, membership has taken a hit. So those are the kind of things that are pressing on people's minds, alongside being ill and family members being ill, and so on. So, yeah.
Do we need a building to have church?
I don't know, Christelle. You tell me. What do you think?
I want to hear from you, Ramona.
Right.
I don't think we need a building to have church. I think we can have church outside a building, but I know this is a question often asked. And can we survive without the buildings? Can the church survive without the buildings?
I think we have to then qualify buildings.
Mm-hmm.
In that sense. So that's actually one of the questions we're actually having a conversation about in the churches where I'm at the moment, because we have 4 buildings, all of them struggling. Like, do we need a building? We need some building, I would say. I like to think that buildings are resources, in the same way as people are resources, money, resources, talents, gifts, so on. Buildings are resources. So I think if we begin to look at our buildings as a resource rather than the thing, so for a lot of people, the building is very important because the building is church. And I want to say, actually, the building is a resource to help us do the mission that God is calling us to. And so then it would determine the type of building that we need. So do we need the buildings that we have in the way they're set up? I would say no. But if we then go back and say, okay, what is our mission and what do we need in order to fulfill that mission? What type of building? What would that building look like? It will look very different. Because the weather in the UK is bad, so we do need a building. We can be outside, although we couldn't meet in people's homes. But again, you thinking about what's the congregation makeup? Is older people, younger people, and all those kind of things. So I would say buildings are important in that they allow us to carry the mission of God. But if they are not doing that, then they are, to me, they are surplus to requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are your views on things like televangelism and like if you were doing all your broadcasts remotely online on a tool like this, for example, is that a way potentially you could have one building and the other people could watch that online? Is that the sort of thing you're thinking about, or are you thinking more of a bigger building, maybe with different facilities, that's actually more useful for today's thing than a traditional church?
Well, I mean, I think, okay, there are two things that you said in that.
Yeah.
The whole online presence, because when COVID hit, we went into online YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel for Chelmsford Methodist. And, now that people are coming back to church, the people who are watching it, the numbers are going down. And so what we did was responded to a crisis, which was great and it worked. But now I think we need to look at, okay, going forward, it has changed. Yeah, we're no longer in that kind of crisis. And if we're then going to continue doing online worship, we need to change the way we do it. We can't just do it the way we're doing it. So we have to think about, okay, now, are we now looking at a different audience, looking at an audience that don't go to church, and therefore the type of services we do should change. The other thing is the building, it's the building for me really has to reflect the kind of work that is happening. So I don't necessarily think you need flashy things. Let's get a smoke machine in. Let's get a big music band in. All of that. We have to go back to what is our mission, what is our vision as a church congregation, and then work our way from that to the building and to the location and so on. So I do think that we need a combination, and the word hybrid has been thrown around quite a lot since COVID, hybrid church. The idea that you have an online church happening at the same time as in the service, in face-to-face happening. And that kind of thing I find really interesting. And I one of the things I realized through lockdown was I actually enjoyed doing the online services. And doing stuff like this, and so and I think there is a place for that, and so we have to move away from an either or situation, but really get more familiar and more comfortable with and.
Yeah. What was interesting about excuse me, I'm a little sick, but what was interesting about churches going online during lockdown is it allowed people who couldn't normally get to church to finally have access to church. And then it also opened a door for people around the world to attend services in places they wouldn't have normally been able to attend. And so I found that quite fascinating. What was your experience with that in that capacity, Ramona? Or even what do you think about that?
Yeah, that certainly was the case for us. So a lot of our older members suddenly became very techie. I remember going to one and she wanted to get a tablet, and I was telling her what kind of tablet to get. She got a smartphone, and she's in her 80s, 90s. And so a lot of the older members, their children helped them get online, and they were able to enjoy the service because they hadn't been coming to church before COVID. And I think that's really important. And my fear is coming out of COVID now, we might forget about those people. So I had one person say in a meeting the other day, well, we should just stop the online service because it's just making people stay home and not come to church. And I think, really, is that what's happening? And my fear is that we might forget them and just say, well, we're back in the buildings now, let's just do that. So what I would like to see is that we actually look at our online worship and look at who are the people who are viewing. Look at the content that we are putting out, and what is the purpose of it. Because if it's just simply doing what we've always done, then that we have to review things all the time, and we can't simply stay the same. So I find it a really struggle when I'm doing the online service because I'm conscious that I don't know who's going to watch this thing. And I want to do it in a way that if somebody, Joe Blogs, who's never been to church, watches it, that they're able to get something out of it. and the temptation, it is a lot of work,
Yeah.
because I'm doing the video and editing everything myself. And so the temptation is just to do the easiest thing, which I felt I have done a couple of times. But if we are to look at it as a vital part of ministry, then we have to look at the bigger picture and see who a target audience, what is our purpose, and so on.
I know I attended several services overseas, and during that time, people interacted with each other online during the service. So it built a sense of community, and nobody was forgotten, because there was still that something that we hadn't seen, or I hadn't seen, but there was still that community happening while being part of a service. And I found that really valuable. And I imagine people who can't normally get to services, whether it's disability or age or what have you, nobody wants to be left out, or to feel lonely, or where is that community now? And so I'm just curious where the various churches, various denominations are seeing the way forward in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about, we had a church council meeting last week, and I was thinking about some of the members in one of the smaller congregations. They are not online, so they haven't been able to access the service. And I thought, well, how can we fix that? And so my thought is to take service church to them. So what I've suggested is that once a month, a few of us go into the homes of those people and do a short service for half an hour with prayers and readings, and take it to them so that they feel that they're still part of the community. Because I really think that's important. And I think for me, COVID has highlighted the fact that we have been ignoring the people at home who haven't been able to get out to church. We have been ignoring them. Yes, we might do visits to them and so on, but in terms of worship, we have largely ignored them. And so that's something that's now I'm working on to start with that small congregation.
Okay, well, I'll ask the question Christelle usually asks, which is, how can people find out about you and the things you do, and how can people find out about the Methodist Church in general?
Right, so I'm on Twitter, Snazzy Deacon.
Yeah.
I'm also on Instagram, again at Snazzy Deacon, and you can find me on Facebook, Deacon Ramona Samuel, and that's kind of my public work page, if you like. Even though I confess I don't do a lot on there. I mainly set it up for church folk who are sending me friend requests. And then I have my Facebook page, Ramona Samuel. And if you want to follow me in fashion, I'm on Instagram at Mona's Lovely Closet.
Oh, we didn't even hit on the fashion, Ramona.
I didn't even know fashion was a thing.
You did not ask me about my gorgeous shoes.
About your shoes and your clothes. And I was at an event Ramona did, Tim, and I won a scarf. She was giving away to a participant, possibly a scarf.
Have you picked up the scarf yet?
What did you say?
Have you picked up the scarf yet?
Oh, she mailed it to me. So yeah, she mailed it to me. She was very kind and mailed it to me. So that was really fun. So Ramona also does a lot of work with women and building women up. And we didn't even get to that part. So we might have to have you on, Ramona, to talk about your building of women and your fashion. We've left all that out.
Yeah, I should say also find me. I have a Facebook group, Creative Faith Community. So on Facebook, so find that and request to join. We do all things creativity and spirituality on that page.
Yes, all these coloring and everything. So thank you, Ramona, for being here. Thank you for being a light in the world. It's so fun just even seeing you in social media and having your presence around us. So thank you so much. And everyone knows where you can find her now. Scan the little box, and thank you.
I had all the stuff she just said on.
Yeah.
She's got a Twitter handle at the moment on there. So
Tim, she's so much more. We didn't even get to everything. We'll see you all back again next Wednesday. Thank you again, Ramona.
Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for being on the show, Ramona.
Bye-bye.